All right. So excited. It is our sixth dose with Layla, a freshman from GCE Lab from Chicago. We started this podcast only 7 days ago, and we are already 6 episodes in. And the purpose of Youth Are Here is to elevate youth voices and share their experiences and their stories because they're so in need of being heard. And for the adults out there who are in touch with their childhood, in touch with their youth, we can definitely relate. But especially in this time when we are social distancing and remote learning, it's really important to hear from everybody's experience, and especially the youth who are learning to learn online. So that's kind of what this first series is about, is learning to learn online. And without further ado, we have Layla. How are you? Hello, Layla.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. And tell me a little bit about what school you go to.
I go to GCE Lab, which is a private school. Um, it's it's really different than the school I went to before, to say the least. We learn a lot about relating everything to the world. So, if we're learning a math concept, it's going to have some correlation to some issue that's going on. And it's really nice being able to have conversations about real things that are going on and relating it back to anything we're learning.
Yeah, definitely. And would you say that it has been an adjustment learning this new, like their way of teaching their curriculum?
Yeah, it's definitely very different. My previous school had, I want to say 35 kids in my class, and now I have 12 people in my whole grade. And that's also different because I don't have to compete for the teacher's attention, and being able to have actual conversations with everyone and engage. So definitely a big adjustment.
Definitely, definitely. That's a great point to bring up, is the reduced class sizes. What does the reduced class size look like in remote learning?
Yeah, I mean, um, online it's a lot easier. It's a lot more convenient because uh, pretty much everyone has their camera on, and it feels pretty real opposed to a lot of. I remember when the end of 8th grade when we went online, it wasn't very engaging. Um, Pretty much everyone had their camera off, and it was just kind of hard to you know engage everyone. So it's a little different, yeah.
Yeah. And GCE Lab is unique in that you all are going to be remote learning for the entire school year, where CPS students are still kind of waiting to see what it might look like after the first and second quarter. How, talk about like your initial reactions to that, knowing that you were going to be remote learning all school year.
Yeah, at first it's definitely something you have to come to terms with, but in the end, I'm glad that they want to put safety first, and if we have to sacrifice, a couple months of in-person learning for people to stay safe and for us to actually have in-person learning successfully, I think it's definitely worth it, and I'm glad that our school will take those measures.
What was it like? I mean, especially as a freshman, I definitely remember starting high school and being excited freshman year. Like you get to be in a new school and a bigger building, and you don't necessarily have to be with like the neighborhood friends. What was it like having your freshman year, your starting your high school experience online?
Um, it was definitely an adjustment. Knowing that I finished my 8th grade year online definitely helped. I also took some classes during the summer online. So adjusting for me wasn't too difficult, especially because, I have a quiet space to have meetings and to have my camera on.
Yeah.
And not everyone has that. So transitioning in terms of that was definitely a lot easier than I know it was for a lot of people. So, and I knew two people in my class from a previous experience. So I was glad so I could see some familiar faces. So
Yeah, that definitely always helps. And I know that you had somewhat of a, well, all eighth graders, I'm sure, have a process and how they choose a high school. What was your process like?
so I went through a program called High Jump where they guided us a lot through the high school application process. So in that we learned about private schools and boarding schools, and I honestly wouldn't have known anything about that if I hadn't gone through the program. So because of that, I was able to apply, and I was able to take the exams for private schools and boarding schools, and I was able to apply to a lot more schools. And so the application process was definitely different for me than some of the kids in my homeschool. Um, but in the end, I'm glad that I applied to a lot. I had safety schools, and just being mindful and being realistic about where I want to go.
Yeah. Um, what do you mean by be realistic about where you want to go?
So for most private schools, you have to take um, an exam, and uh, generally they're looking for certain scores, and for selective enrollment schools, they're looking for certain scores. So, calculating about, how much you scored based on, uh, they have lists about, I think, the general scores they're looking for. So, if you're a lot lower than, considering other schools, if you're in that range, then, considering applying.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And how do you think your experience would have been different if it wasn't remote learning, like during the end of eighth grade?
Um, I think the adjustment would have been a little bit different. The school I was at previously, I had been at for about 9 years, and finishing online was really strange because I was surrounded by all these people that I had known since I was so little, and finishing the year and not being able to see them was really different. Um, and so I feel like if I hadn't finished in that sense, um, it might be more difficult now because uh, being online, you have to, kind of know how to work meetings and whatever software they're using. So I guess it depends.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any pluses to going to school online?
Um, I mean, for me, my teachers use mostly Zoom and Google Meet, so having all of those classes in, one spot, if you're late to class, it's kind of on you because it's not like, you the bus took too long or something. Um, so I guess having that all in one space is nice. And we use like Google Classroom for pretty much every class to submit stuff. So for me, I don't think it's very difficult.
Yeah. What has it been like making friends and building relationships when you're not in person?
Yeah, at first I think it was pretty difficult. I it's kind of hard for me to make new friends and communicate with people. Um, but I had one girl reach out to me on social media, I think, and then from there I kind of got to communicate with my other classmates a little bit more. Um, and so from there it got a little bit easier. But at first it was difficult because I really didn't know anyone at all except for maybe two people. But I hadn't really talked to them even then. So
Yeah, and you said there's what, 12 students in all of freshman year?
yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a whole different experience. Um, that is very unique. What are you learning about right now that excites you?
Um, in school, I mean, we're learning a lot about well, I have a humanities class called SDGs in U, which is about the Sustainable Development Goals. And we learned a little bit about like quality education and gender inequality, like the pay gaps. And to me, that's pretty interesting because we're also comparing different countries and how those inequalities look in different countries and kind of trying to pinpoint, why it looks that way. And even in extremely developed countries, they're still having these basic issues. So to me, those conversations are pretty interesting. Um, and we also have blogs where we kind of post different action projects, which are like an analysis of stuff that we're learning. Um, so those are interesting too. It's fun writing them and getting feedback and learning more. So
What do you think you take from that class? What do you take from that class that you think you will use beyond freshman year, beyond high school?
um, well, there are 17 goals, and they all have something to do with, some social issues or like climate change, quality education, like I mentioned. They're all very real issues, and some of them I may have faced, and some of them other people have to live through every day. Like hunger is one of them. So I think just at least being mindful of the goals and mindful of the fact that they're very real and they're happening to a lot of people is something really important to be aware about. And I'm really interested in film, but also kind of the storytelling aspect of film. So having in mind those issues and possibly creating projects that can reflect solutions or other reality of those issues to me is a very big deal.
Out of the 17 goals, which one stands out to you the most?
um, Out of the 17, I would have to say quality education because I think a lot of the other goals kind of tie into it. I think, stuff like racism, I think that stuff is a lot of learned behaviors that come from misinformation. And I think if, people had access to better, quality education, then, some people wouldn't be so ignorant and they would be able to have access to, better schools and ultimately better careers and just be happier overall.
What kind of film?
That's a good question. Um, Ultimately, I want to create something that can help people. And I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in fictional worlds. So, you know, maybe not necessarily documentaries, but something that people can relate to. that can empower them and make them feel like they can make a difference. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I never read a graphic novel until I went to college. I just never, I didn't really know how to read it. I didn't really know like what order to go in. But in college, we read Persepolis, and I loved it because it was creative nonfiction. And I got a lot of historical background in a way that I would never have received if I didn't read it that way. Um, and so I so because of that, I love creative nonfiction. It's like you have the information, but it's also done in a way that makes you really put yourself in in the character's shoes, even though you know the character went through these very real things. Did you read Persepolis?
No, I've heard good things about it though.
Yeah, there's Persepolis too, but I am loyal to Persepolis one, and I don't know how many years ago at this point, maybe 10-ish or more years, Persepolis was banned in Chicago public schools, and by banned meaning like censored, like pulled from the Chicago public school libraries, and students got, became aware of it, and there was this huge march protest in front of schools, but specifically in front of Lane, and that student movement reversed the ban on Persepolis.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing what students have always done, but especially now I feel like are very getting very organized, and they're already knowledgeable. So it's like turning that knowledge into action and rallying, getting others to um, join the the movement, the initiative. What do you see is really relevant right now going on?
Um, I mean, of course, recently there's been a lot about, you know, racism, especially with Black Lives Matter. Um, to me, I've noticed a lot of racism towards Asians, especially because of coronavirus, because it, came from China and people will call it the China virus, or they'll make it seem like Asians are more, likely to have it, um, or just little comments that are just kind of uncalled for. Um, and I see it online. I've, you know, met people who kind of feel that way, and it's definitely a real thing. So I think racism right now is a very present thing.
Yeah, I think it goes back to quality education that you brought up, and um, information being so important. Not only information, but being exposed to the world and to other cultures and to other people, so that there isn't this fear of the unknown. Sometimes I feel like it's not, sometimes it is misinformation. Sometimes it's like completely malicious. People are taught to hate. And then sometimes I think that it's also just fear of the unknown. And it spews from that. Um, what is really important as an aspiring film director? What is really important for you to get out of high school in order for you to be ready for that upon graduation?
Um, well, I think obviously, a big part is support throughout the college process. Um, Personally, I'd like to really go to a university out of the country, which is very different. And in terms of film, my school has had people interested in film before. So it's not something they're unfamiliar with. And just kind of, I think because so much of the course material ties into these real issues, I think just paying attention to it and being able to remember it so that when it's time to really create my own work, um, then I can apply it to that, and I can, help people understand. And I think storytelling in film, whether it's with lighting or words, I think it's very powerful. So yeah, just taking what I learned with me.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a country in mind that you would like to go to college at? College in?
Um, I would say probably South Korea. It's something about myself I don't know a lot about in terms of like the actual country. Um, or possibly Europe. I think those would also be really interesting. And if I don't go to a university there, I can still save money to travel. Um, just somewhere to me out of the US sounds nice to me. It sounds like a good way to learn about other places. Um, but I think East Asia sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think it's so important to travel. And I speak with high school students about their plan after high school. Most of the students are seniors right now. So they are definitely knee deep in SATs and doing college applications and asking for recommendations and all that. Um, and although a lot of them would like to travel, unfortunately, they don't see it as an option, like to take a gap year because they don't want to lose out on possible scholarship opportunities, which I think is really unfortunate, to feel a pressure to go right into college so it could be affordable essentially when you really do want to travel. And I wish that more, whether it was study abroad options or options like that, I wish there was more information about it, because a lot of the times I feel like when students hear about it, it's like on some random bulletin board for a week, or by the time you hear about it, the flyer has expired. It's unless you're seeking that information, I think a lot of students don't really see it as an option for them, or it's too scary, or I can understand it might be too scary to want to travel for college. Yeah, but I definitely commend you for wanting to travel. I know that you enjoy studying languages. What languages do you like to study?
Well, right now my school is only offering Spanish, but I'm also learning Korean and Japanese primarily. Um, I can read and understand some Korean. I want to take a break from that though, because sometimes it seems kind of forced because of how much I want to go there. It's it can be demotivating. So
Explain that. How can it be demotivating?
I think I want to go there and I want to be able to speak it fluently by the time I go there. Um, so that kind of creates this pressure on myself, really for no reason. Um, but yeah, it does feel kind of demotivating in that sense. Um, so and also focusing on Spanish too, because that's for school.
I I learn well, growing up I was exposed to Tagalog, and because of my mom, and she would always speak Taglish, Tagalog and English combined. And um, it's really it's really something to be immersed in the language. I didn't quite realize how much Tagalog I knew until like I was starting to try to refresh on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I can kind of understand the context of this. Um, how do you feel conversationally? Like you said, you can read and understand some. Do you feel confident like starting to speak to someone if you were to run into someone? Like, would you feel comfortable starting a conversation in Korean?
Um, Definitely not full sentences. I think if I were like at the store and they were to ask me like, "Oh, do you want a bag?" or like stuff like that, I think I would, understand and be able to respond. But really, it's the sentence structure is very difficult for me to kind of get used to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. The characters are completely different. Um, moving on to something completely different, what do you think students your age really need right now in this time?
Um, I think they should know that they're in control, and to some people that might mean schoolwork or relationships. And when I say you're in control, I think that applies to um, whatever's going on. I feel like because right now, with coronavirus, you're being kind of forced into this thing where a lot of stuff is online, and there's also this fear about people who actually catch it, and some people's families have already dealt with this. So knowing that you can control your how much effort you put into school, and your relationships with your family, um, I think is important to think about.
Where would you, thinking back on, well, let me step back for a second. So I feel like remote learning and social distancing has affected all of us, whether we're working or in school or living with people who are working and in school. How have you maintained self-care? Like, what are some of your self-care strategies?
Um, I think for me, I already spend a lot of time alone, and it's can obviously get pretty lonely. So surrounding yourself with people who you care about, and for me, that's usually my family. Um, I also would say probably like exercising, especially being stuck inside all the time. Exercising um, can be kind of a relief for me. For some people, it's different. Um, yeah, I would say generally being around family kind of can put me at ease.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that especially walks, whether people consider that exercise or not, but walks, especially in nature, so important. I feel like it just immediately, I don't know, removes you from what might be stressing out or what you might be thinking about, just to like step outside and feel the wind. Um, Thinking of yourself this time last year, what advice would you have given yourself?
About a year ago, I was obviously just starting eighth grade. And at that time, I just kind of felt like I was just going along with stuff. I didn't really feel like I was doing anything fun. Like I wasn't, learning any, like really learning any languages or um, I don't know. I was just kind of surrounding myself with people who, they didn't really care about school or anything. Um, So I probably would have just told myself that, you're in control to do what you want to do. And you don't have to surround yourself with these people to feel comfortable.
Where do you hope to see yourself a year from today?
A year from today, I'll be a sophomore. I would say hopefully, have some money saved and um, just spend the summer doing something fun. The past couple of summers, I've just been doing mostly school stuff, and it's it's helpful to me because kind of keeping your brain active during the summertime, but at the same time it's still extra pressure. Hopefully I'll be able to work and save some money for college or just for savings in general.
You might have already mentioned it. It may be the same piece of advice, but what piece of advice would you like to give people who are watching this?
I would say just surround yourself with people who care a lot about you. Um, because during this time, it's really easy to kind of back yourself into a corner and just kind of uh, let yourself eat away at your whatever you're feeling, and it's easy to become, really lonely. And if you surround yourself with those people, it can kind of bring you out of that place.
Layla, thank you so much for that reminder. And thank you for spending this time with us. I hope to see you again. I hope that we can do this again, especially in like a group setting, to come together and discuss topics in the future. But I hope that you have a wonderful night. And for anybody who is watching or listening to this, thank you for spending this time together with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.